Story 1. My childhood friend Ethan and I were out camping in the forests of Maine for a short trip. Both of us were fairly experienced campers, but this particular spot was new to Ethan. I knew the area well, having been there many times before. We hiked down a trail for several hours to reach a clearing where we set up camp. I believe we arrived around 6 o'clock. After getting everything ready, we built a nice campfire, cooked food, opened some beers, and talked as the sun set. It was a chill, enjoyable evening. About 2 hours into the night though, we both heard what sounded like movement just outside our campsite, beyond the firelight. We looked, but saw nothing, and heard nothing else the rest of the night. We figured it was probably just a small animal scurrying away. Honestly, if nothing else had happened, I wouldn't have remembered it. That's how insignificant it seemed. If you camp often, you know those noises happen frequently and are almost always harmless. After a couple of drinks and feeling tired, we called it a night, put out the fire. Story 1. My childhood friend Ethan and I were out camping in the forests of Maine for a short trip. Both of us were fairly experienced campers, but this particular spot was new to Ethan. I knew the area well, having been there many times before. We hiked down a trail for several hours to reach a clearing where we set up camp. I believe we arrived around 6 o'clock. After getting everything ready, we built a nice campfire, cooked food, opened some beers, and talked as the sun set. It was a chill, enjoyable evening. About 2 hours into the night though, we both heard what sounded like movement just outside our campsite, beyond the firelight. We looked, but saw nothing, and heard nothing else the rest of the night. We figured it was probably just a small animal scurrying away. Honestly, if nothing else had happened, I wouldn't have remembered it. That's how insignificant it seemed. If you camp often, you know those noises happen frequently and are almost always harmless. After a couple of drinks and feeling tired, we called it a night, put out the fire, and went to sleep in our tents. We woke up early the next morning. This spot was good for a reason. A secluded private pond was just half a mile through the woods. Nobody knew about it because the trail didn't lead there. It was really nice, featuring a mini waterfall and a small river. We spent most of our morning there, like 3 or 4 hours before heading back to make food and rest. I even took a short nap. Around 6 o'clock, as the sun lowered, we realized we hadn't collected firewood. We'd used up most of the dry sticks around camp the night before, so I had to search further. Midway through, Ethan said he'd take a walk to explore and pick up wood on his way back. I said sure, and kept gathering sticks. Ethan often did this. I think he just liked some alone time in nature. I got a good pile of firewood and sat at camp, waiting for Ethan to return so I could start the fire. The sun sank lower and lower, and eventually I realized he'd been gone strangely long. He usually wasn't out this close to sunset, and he knew better than to wander woods that late. Our only way to communicate out there with no cell service was through small satellite messengers we kept in our waist packs, along with bear spray. It's mainly an SOS device, but handy for this too. I pulled mine out to message him and saw he'd already sent one a few minutes ago. Ethan said he'd gotten kind of lost, but stumbled back to the pond. I told him to stay put, and I'd hurry over to lead him back. When lost, it's best not to risk getting more lost, and we both knew that. Knowing the area, I raced towards the pond against the setting sun. Even with headlamps and knowing the terrain, it's easy to get lost at night. I was about halfway there, maybe 4 or 5 minutes away, when I got another message. I checked it, assuming he was asking for an ETA. But Ethan had sent, "I see you," What did he mean? I wasn't near the pond yet. I stopped, looked around confused, saw no one, and messaged back that I wasn't there and didn't see him. Worried, I started running. I reached the pond quickly, running up to the tree line. Ethan wasn't there. I could see the whole area around the water, and he was nowhere. My face went pale. I pulled out the messenger. My last message hadn't been opened. I called his name, my voice echoing. The sun was nearly gone, the forest quieter and darker. Maybe he'd started heading back. Where else could he be? With daylight almost gone, I knew I had to return to camp to figure things out. If I waited, I might not find the campsite in the dark. I started walking, feeling uneasy as the woods darkened. All I could think about was his ominous last message, "I see you." It was nearly pitch black when I was a minute from the clearing. Then I saw something, a flickering orange glow from the campsite. Closer, I saw the campfire was lit, and someone stood by it. Relief washed over me. Ethan must be back. But as I approached, the person suddenly shifted, looked at me, and sprinted away from the fire and out of the campsite. Heart pounding. I ran up, confused and terrified. That wasn't Ethan. I pulled out my messenger, spamming texts. A minute later, Ethan ran out. Story 2 by Anonymous. I took a short getaway alone to an Airbnb roughly 6 hours from where I lived. I didn't pick it for any special reason. I just opened the Airbnb map, looked for something cheap and somewhat isolated in a small town to escape the city and enjoy quiet for a few days. I didn't care about the town itself, since I planned to stay inside the Airbnb most of the time. The house I booked sat alone in a small forest within this tiny town and was the only listing for the whole area. The good price hooked me. I drove, mostly on empty wooded roads, until I reached the house. More of a cabin, honestly. It was older, surrounded by trees, with no other buildings in sight. I opened the creaky front door and brought my things in. My only task before settling in was going to the grocery store for food and drinks. I drove into town mid-afternoon. Almost no cars or people were out. Even for a small town, it felt like a ghost town to me, coming from the city. Walking through, the grocery store felt just as empty. The few people I passed gave me strange, cold looks, following me with their eyes. It felt like they somehow knew I wasn't local and disliked it. It was really weird. I got what I needed and headed back to the cabin. By then, I'd mostly decided I was just being paranoid. How could they care about some random person in a grocery store? I shook it off, feeling better knowing I wouldn't go back into town. I unpacked and watched TV in the living room. That whole night and next day were nice and quiet. The following night, though, it poured. A storm rolled in, showing no signs of stopping. I was cozied up inside, half asleep on the couch, when a knock came at the cabin door. I shot up and looked. Someone outside in the middle of this storm. Impossible. I checked my phone. No texts from the host. It was just one knock. After 30 seconds, I got up and walked over. Looking out, I saw no one, but it was very dark with no porch light, so without opening the door, I couldn't see much. As minutes passed, my mind raced to every explanation besides someone knocking. Maybe the storm blew something over, or I dreamt it half asleep. I think I just didn't want to believe someone was out there because it was so unsettling. I laid back down on the couch, TV on, half paying attention. A decent amount of time passed, maybe an hour. The TV was quiet, the storm still raging. Between the sounds, I suddenly heard a cough behind me, a man's cough, quickly stifled. I jolted my head back and looked, catching a split-second movement outside the window, not enough to see if it was a reflection or a figure, but the cough confirmed it. Someone was outside the Airbnb. They must have been watching through that window, sending instant chills through me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, saying I thought I was being stalked and someone was creeping around outside. The storm was too loud to hear footsteps, so I had no idea if they ran or stayed. I was relieved when a police officer showed up just 3 minutes later. I opened the door and explained, but the officer looked visibly unbothered. When I finished, he just said, "That's it," like it was no big deal. He took no notes. He had that same cold look as everyone in town. He almost seemed mad at me, genuinely upset I'd made him come out in the storm. He said he hadn't seen anyone when he pulled in, so cool if something actually happened. Before I could say more, he turned his back and drove away. I couldn't believe it. That made me feel less safe and more disturbed by whatever was happening in this town. This whole place had me on edge. Knowing something was wrong, I decided to leave early. I locked the door and rushed to pack. I'd only just opened my backpack and started stuffing clothes in maybe 60 seconds after the officer left, when heavy knocks slammed against the front door again. This time, they didn't stop. They kept banging. I checked the bedroom window. The cop car was gone, so this was the watcher. I hurriedly packed everything I could in 3 or 4 minutes. I thought about calling the cops again, but felt it might get me in trouble or the cop would side with the other guy. Then the knocking suddenly stopped. The storm seemed louder. I couldn't tell if they'd left, so I quietly walked to the door and looked out. No one was there. I knew I had to leave. Backpack on, keys ready. I was at the door for a minute before glancing back. Again, at that same window, I saw something move. This was my only chance. I swung open the door and fled into the storm. My heart raced, knowing the person was probably running around the house to get me. I got in my car, turned it on, and pulled out of the driveway. With the heavy downpour, I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. I don't know if they chased me. They could have been right behind me, running up to the car as I drove off, and I wouldn't have seen them. I drove down the forested driveway to the road, left town, and drove straight home without stopping. That was the most unsettling, creepy experience of my life. It's worse because I don't know why it happened or who was creeping around, watching me through the windows and banging on the door. I keep thinking about the weird vibe in that town. Maybe people knew the cabin was an Airbnb and hated outsiders, taking extreme measures to scare me off. It felt like I was in a town that was part of a private cult. If I'd stayed that night, things might have escalated past the point of no return. Luckily, I didn't find out. Story 3 by G.S. This happened just 7 or 8 months ago. My friend Josh had been a close buddy since our senior year of college, about 3 years at the time. We were tight that last year, but after college, jobs led me to move to a city 3 hours away. We hadn't seen each other for well over a year, but stayed in constant contact. Still great friends, gaming late, texting daily. Then, out of the blue on a Thursday, he called saying his girlfriend was gone for the weekend and asked if I wanted to hang out at his place. Weirdly, on the call, he sounded like he'd just woken up or was really tired, but whatever, I had no plans, hadn't seen him in ages, so I said I'd come. I packed that night and drove down Friday morning. The drive took most of the day with a couple of stops, but I reached his house at 4:30, Josh and his girlfriend of 4 or 5 years had rushed to buy this place right after college. They both had jobs, and the house was super cheap old, sure, but cheap. It was kind of trashy, out in the middle of nowhere, 30 minutes from our college, not in a neighborhood. I went up and knocked, then knocked again. I waited outside a full 5 minutes before he finally answered and invited me in. Immediately, I noticed how different he looked. Really tired expression covered his face. He usually had tons of energy, so this was strange. Maybe just an off day, I thought. We hung out, played some Xbox, had a few drinks, mostly catching up like old times. Still, Josh seemed noticeably different even from when we gamed online. In person, he acted like a different person altogether. Honestly, it felt like he didn't even want to be hanging out. Again, I figured he was just having an unusual day. We all have them, as it got later. Before drinking too much, I suggested we hit the hay early to be fresh for the next day. But through droopy eyes and a tired, gravelly voice, he insisted we stay up. He was barely able to stay awake. This was getting really weird. The more I said we should sleep, the pushier he got. I agreed to hang out another 30 minutes. During that time, it was awkward. He was too tired to hold a conversation, so we mostly sat in silence, sipping drinks. It felt uncomfortable, like I wasn't sitting with a friend anymore. I wondered how this was the same guy I'd known and why he only acted like this in person. I tried asking how he'd been, but he avoided questions. Eventually, I said I needed sleep. Though he pushed, I refused. I was worried and a little creeped out, but hoped things would be normal tomorrow. I went into the spare bedroom to get ready. Something was off. The room was empty except for a small bed against the wall. Stranger still, the bed looked brand new, like it was bought just for my visit. By now, I thought I might be overthinking, but I really wanted to check Josh was okay. I texted his girlfriend. They'd been together 5 years. We'd all hung out a few times in college, though I didn't know her well. She responded within minutes. I'd only said Josh was acting weird and seemed out of it, asking if she'd noticed anything. She said they'd broken up. She'd moved out 4 months ago and had no idea what I meant. I was in shock. Why lie about her just being gone? Why invite me over suddenly now? It didn't add up. It didn't explain his strange behavior and only made him seem less trustworthy, unsettling me more. Not wanting to sleep without answers, I turned toward the door to leave, but froze. I could see a shadow standing right behind it. After a second, it moved away. My heart raced as I moved closer, listened, then opened it, stepping into the hallway. And closing the door behind me, Josh's bedroom door was open. I could hear him moving inside. All house lights were off now, but I immediately noticed something new on the back of the spare room door mount. One side screwed into the wall, the other into the door. He must have just done this, probably hand-screwing it while I was inside, trying to figure things out. I didn't want to stay in that house another second. I started walking quickly and quietly away. In the living room, I spotted something on the kitchen counter. An open package for a deadbolt lock you can only open from one side. My stomach dropped. Then I heard footsteps rushing behind me. I turned. Josh stood there with that same tired, dead look. I asked what the hell he was trying to do. He didn't respond. I felt tension like he was about to act. Before he could, I ran for the front door. He called my name a couple of times in that eerie, tired voice, but I kept going, got in my car, and left. I spent the whole drive home thinking and decompressing. By the time I arrived, Josh had blocked me on everything, making me more certain his intentions were awful. At the time, I didn't report it stupidly. I guess I felt since nothing had happened, I had no proof. Having been close for 3 years made it hard to turn him in. I still can't grasp why he tried to lock me in that room or what his plan was. It's crazy that after 3 years of knowing him, it feels like I never really did. I'm just glad I got out when I did.